iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hello and welcome back to the iHeartPodcast Speaker Series. I'm Will Pearson, president of iHeartPodcast. As you know, every week we like to get together with one of our favorite podcasters, creators, producers, talk about the industry, talk about a new show. Super excited about today's conversation. Daymond John is the founder and CEO of FUBU, much celebrated global lifestyle brand, done over $6 billion in product sales over the years. Of course, he's won countless awards, including Brand Week's Marketer of the Year, best-selling author. Actually, I have a couple of books on my bookshelf over there, including Power Shift, the latest one that I've bought from him. And then 14th season of the business show Shark Tank. It's an incredible show. It's actually one of my favorite shows to watch. We were talking about it just before this. So we may have a few questions about Shark Tank as well. But Daymond, thanks for spending a few minutes with us today.
Oh man, thank you. And I didn't know that you went out and supported the books. I appreciate it, and I hope they have been useful to either you or family members or friends or anybody.
Incredibly. I would suggest them for anybody, not just those that are interested in startups and the entrepreneurial space, but just in sort of how to organize your thinking and guidance there. And we'll probably get to some of that as well. We'll, of course, get to That Moment, which is the reason that we have you here today. That Moment is the name of your new podcast. We've been talking to you and your team for quite some time about starting this. Thrilled to finally be launching it. But before we get to that, I love origin stories of super successful people. And I love your origin story in terms of jumping into the entrepreneurial world and the founding of FUBU. And for those that don't know that story, would you mind just taking us back a little bit and telling us how you did get your start as an entrepreneur? Because I love reading about this story.
Oh, I mean, this is a 54-year story. So how can I put it in 2 minutes? Just basically, kid growing up in New York City, loving fashion, loving hip hop, raised by a single mother. Couldn't really, rap or sing to be in that industry that I loved in that capacity. But, put two things together that I love, fashion and hip hop. Didn't use the lack of funds as an excuse. I would stand out on the corner in 1989 with a bunch of hats that I had made on Good Friday, 89, with a bunch of hats I made the night previously before. And I would sell $800 worth of hats in an hour, and that would start me on the long journey of officially becoming an entrepreneur, which was opening and closing that company 3 times, ran out of cash, working at Red Lobster at night, doing FUBU in the daytime, mortgaging my mother's house, burning furniture to move sewing machines in there and sleeping bags next to it, and almost going bankrupt 2 times when I was broke. And then all of a sudden, 1998, having a product that's globally recognized and millions and millions and millions of dollars in the bank and celebrity and friends, and almost go bankrupt, lose my wife. The business, obviously, like all of the business, goes down and learns to pivot and finds other businesses, invests in other things. All of a sudden, I'm on a show called Shark Tank, and I'm investing in other people. And 14 years in, going on my 15th season, dealing with everything from cancer to divorce to ups, the highest ups, the lowest lows, traveling the world with presidents, speaking on stages, losing it all, gaining it back. I'm here with you today.
It's as simple as that. So you captured it.
Yeah, it's just really simple. It's really simple.
Just do all those things, and you too can have a billion-dollar empire. So
yeah,
it's pretty terrific. Well, let's talk about Shark Tank for a second. I'm curious. I mean, the hundreds, and maybe at this point even thousands of people that you've seen come in front of you pitching the ideas there. When you're there, you have this really it's sort of an instant that they're pitching something to you guys. What are those few things that you're looking for that help you make a decision so quickly as to whether you feel like this is something you would potentially want to jump into?
Well, it's not as quick as you may think. We don't have any information on them. They come in, but an average pitch could be an hour long. So it's not as quick as the 8 minutes you end up seeing, right? But it's not the company. It almost is never the company. The company is a good entry into the doorway of the idea, but it's the person. End of the day, it's the fact that you really gel with this person, you like what they're doing, you think they're solving something, but then you got to look at everything else, the numbers, right? The person's history. You want to work with the person, the size of the market, where you can add value. I may not be able to add value if you are, super geeky and in the tech world where Robert and Cuban are very, very big in. So it's a combination of a bunch of those things, but no matter what, at the end of the day, and I would like to talk about whether it's a Shark Tank or not, when you have two people that want to join forces and they want to solve something together, you can't stop them. The business could be this and that. We'll figure it out. It really is that. It's really two people that want to solve things, right? So it's almost like in your personal relationship or anything else. When you have two people that are working towards a common goal and excited about it, they will figure a way out. If you don't have two people that understand each other, respect each other, respect the goal, willing to communicate, they will not figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there times, you mentioned it's the person, are there times where you're seeing a pitch and you realize this isn't the idea, but this is the person, and you sort of pull them aside and say, like, let's stay in touch because I do believe in you as an individual?
Well, that's a good point. I can't stay in touch with them because of the show.
Got it.
All right. So I can't know them prior, and I cannot stay in touch with them if I don't do a deal, because then there's no show.
Yes.
There's yeah, you know what? I'll come back tomorrow. Yeah, why don't you come back tomorrow? There's got to be stakes. And then being on a show like that, being who I am, I have been so fortunate enough to know that we see an average of 150 people a year. There was one time we were seeing 200 a year. We're going on our 15th season, so you can average that out to around I don't know how many is that, right? Around 2,000. Almost 2,000 people, right? Or something of that nature. So anyway, I know somebody else is coming through the door again right after that person leaves. So, I may be caught up in it in a moment, but then all of a sudden another person comes in and they have it all together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's talk about the podcast. It's called That Moment. And actually, even in telling your origin story as an entrepreneur, you mentioned several of these moments and experiences and things that you go through. Would love to hear you talk about the idea of the show, because this idea of that moment isn't always about that successful moment. It's not always about that tipping point. It's not always about those great things that happen. It's those downturns, it's those learnings, it's all of these things. But we'd love to hear you talk about what your vision is for that moment.
Yeah, a lot of the people that you will see on podcasts or hear on podcasts or even on interviews, we get used to, if they're public facing people, we get used to knowing our sound bites, what works. It doesn't mean we say it forever, right? But this 2 weeks, if there's a topic in the news, I can highlight that topic, right? And we want to obviously add value to who's listening and say, our opinion on what is happening currently. But it becomes really like speaking points that are valuable. But, I want to know from some of the world's most interesting people, whether they are celebrities or athletes or somebody who created some science that you have no idea about. I want to know about certain moments in their life and where were they mentally. So like me, when I'm thinking about moments in my life, we can talk about the Daymond John and that story I previously told you about, all those things. But when you start digging deep, how did I feel when I was going bankrupt the first time? What was the song that was playing? Kind of like, when, they say some of the most powerful moments in a movie is not when the person's saying anything, when the person is, you're just reflecting their eyes and something's going on, and I remember, or even when I was bankrupt, when I was going bankrupt and it was my first shot at this, I remember standing outside the club and the song "Rising to the Top" by Kenny Burke was playing. It was a very famous song and still is, but in Queens, it goes. It's a song about aspiration and rising up. And I remember standing outside a club because I couldn't get in. I first of all didn't have the money to get in. And also it was a rough club. It was the only club I knew in my neighborhood, and all the really well-known drug dealers would go in that club. So I didn't want to go into that club for various reasons. A lot of my friends were there and they had moved to that side. I said I was never going to sell drugs. So I didn't want to be kind of like inducted into that and pressured. I didn't want to get beat up because I wasn't part of that scene, but I wanted to hear some music. And then all of a sudden I see these drug dealers, these famous, they get off these motorcycles. They have all the gold. They look like Mr. T.
Yep.
All the women are screaming over them. The bikes are shining really glossy. I'm in my little beat up car, listening to Rising to the Top, saying to myself, I will be that person one day, but I will do this legally.
Right.
Um, and it was a very dark moment in my life in one sense, but it was a very bright moment in my life and how I felt at that moment. And in that interview of that moment, I will go deeper towards what happened when I went home that night. Did I have a girlfriend in my life? Did I have somebody special? Was my mother thinking of me as somebody who was somebody she was proud of, or the fact that I took that 1 year of high school and never went back? And what where were my fears? And so when I get deeper into that with other people, I think that people are going to find that it's very, very insightful on how some of your favorite people or people you never knew of that you respect, what did they do at those moments of their life? And we will go over several of those moments and dig really deep into it.
Yeah. And I feel like it's, even though, people don't have identical experiences, those moments, I think people can identify with certain either similar experiences or something that they may be going through right now, to say, I'm going through a moment and didn't even fully realize it. I'm hearing Daymond, or I'm hearing,
Yeah.
another guest
You
on the
will be
show.
able to, we will all be able to relate to,
Yeah.
we've gotten to a point in this country where everything is either totally left or totally right, and there is no, we're not meeting people in the middle. And I honestly believe that 90% of us have more in common than we have apart. It's just 10% of these assholes trying to rip us apart because they're taking up all the air, right? But every one of us can relate to that moment, whether you are white, black, uh, Jewish, woman, veteran, rich or poor. We can all resonate with a moment when we were somewhat discriminated against for various reasons. So I can be talking to somebody wealthy, and I can say, "What was the moment when your parents' wealth hurt you because you walked into a room and people thought you were just gifted those things? How did you feel? You know what? You know, well, but today I think that Black people may think that white people have it made, and white people may think that Black people are doing it this for this reason, and Jewish people. When I start going into those moments with people, we will find defining moments that we all can relate to.
Yep.
You know,
That's it. I think that's super interesting. Well, let's talk about the format of the podcast,
yeah.
because you've, obviously been an incredible successful author. You've been on Shark Tank for a long time. You're a regular speaker. You've done several other things. We're jumping into podcasting. I'm curious, what is attractive to you about the podcast space that made you want to do this?
Well, I had a podcast a long time ago. I put out one small, 6 months or 1 year thing
Mm-hmm.
way down the road. I think in like 6 years ago, and it I think it was in collaboration with ZipRecruiter, and it went to like number 3 or number 1 on the business podcast list
Mm-hmm.
in a quick amount of time. And I realized that there's some free flowing conversations that people rather hear, and they people absorb podcasts way different than necessarily people may absorb my books or see me on Shark Tank. And there's so many other facets of my life that I can pull out of other people. And when we're hearing those moments from that person, I'm sure and I know it already because there've been moments that I related to that didn't hear
Yeah.
things from me. And I like that kind of chilling on the stoop, we're going to kick it type of thing. And I think it's easily something that people can absorb. I'm a huge fan of podcasts because I'm dyslexic. I don't have time to sit down and knock out books.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Podcasts are something you can do, of course, while simultaneously on the treadmill or doing various other things. So
Mm-hmm.
I figured this was a platform that I can really be in touch with people that follow me, people who don't follow me, and get really in depth because we just kind of wash over things when we talk about interviews. They're always 3 minutes, 5 minutes. You can't go deep into it.
Curious to hear about what else you're up to. Anything that we should be looking forward to coming in the near future from you?
Yeah, well, I'm filming a new season of Shark Tank. I have my Black Entrepreneurs Day that I do annually, and we've won several Webbies for. Where by the time we've given away, we're going to go on our 4th year. We give away an average of $250,000 away to small African American businesses that need it in grants. And I think this year we'll be breaking the $1 million mark of giving away money,
Oh, wow.
and we do very similar to what we're doing on that moment. We interview really great subjects at the Apollo Theater. People like who've been on in the past have been Kevin Hart, Shaquille O'Neal, Venus Williams, Spike Lee, Run, in Ice-T, LL Cool J, Bob Johnson. So we interview these people to talk about their failures and how do they maintain, success and overcome those things. And then I always put, let me see, I figured you're gonna ask me, and I'll put on my top hat because I also am going down the journey again of education. And I have a book. This book didn't not only hit New York Times bestseller list for so now 3 or 4 weeks, but it also became Amazon's top book for about 2 days. That means the top book of all books, not children books, all books. That means
that's
all
amazing.
Books. Did you hear I say all? All books
all
in the
books,
country,
books.
For about a day or so. That means all books, even the books, the pamphlets that come with any device you buy. You throw it
So
away.
you're trying to tell me all books?
Yeah. Meaning again, it's not for me. It's just America has voted that kids need financial intelligence, and families need it. And this is actually the only book out now that I've ever seen that not only has financial intelligence, but talks about how to think like an entrepreneur at a very young age, which allows kids to process money and not almost go bankrupt 3 times like the author of this book. And this is really great. I mean, I'm loving it. The beautiful thing about that, I get on any kind of podcast or interview, nobody cares about politics or religion when we are talking about children. And this is going to be my legacy of not the book necessarily, but creating a conversation in this country that everybody will now start hopefully making books and or materials for kids 5 to 15 years old to start giving them an understanding of financial intelligence, so they're not at 17 years old acquiring $500,000 worth of student debt for a career they're not even sure they want, that they won't pay up until they're 60.
Well, I love it too, because you're reaching an audience probably many of whom have the skills and the drive and the willingness to become a great entrepreneur. Some of them don't always know that, though. Don't always know that they have the tools and the ability, and to inspire them to say, go do this. You can do this. Here's some of the tools for that.
100%. But, it's also for entrepreneurs because, it's harder working within the system. And if you have the mentality of an entrepreneur, that will separate you from the rest of the team. A lot of people I'm waiting for my check every week or every month. If you have this idea or the mentality of an entrepreneur, you can work on your day job. Maybe you can be of more value there. Maybe you become a partner in the company, or you get, you get rewarded off of that. So it's really about all just the thought process of that. And actually, what's going on, how to utilize money in very, very simple ways, that I wish somebody would have taught me when I was 20 years old.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate what you do to teach all of us. These are skills that we could all use, and coming from somebody who's actually experienced the highs, the lows. Unfortunately, more of the highs, but it's been fantastic to watch. We're incredibly excited about this podcast. Any other thoughts on what we should be looking forward to with the podcast before I let you go?
No, I think that's just about it, really. Listen, we're going to go deep on some of these things, and we're just going to talk about everything. You never know where that rabbit hole leads to when you start asking somebody, questions, because I remember when my first book was out, and I was sitting with the ghostwriter, and I said, so my father left when I was 10, and, so mom and I, and he said, you can't just say that. The reader needs to know how you feel at the moment. So what do you mean how I feel? He said, well, how do you feel? I said, that was cool. Well, how do you feel? Your father left. Yeah, it's fine. How do you feel? Your father left. Daddy! So all of a sudden, right? You start going down a rabbit hole, right? And I think that is the most fascinating. I'm so excited about it because I'm literally going to be trying to pull out things that I want to know. And you ask Ice-T some questions, you're going to get some very, very colorful answers.
I can't wait. I really can't. It's going to be a fantastic podcast. It's called That Moment. It's out now. Daymond, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back again with another great conversation next week. Take care.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.